all of that kind of doesn't matter because the sheer facts of the matter is that he did take out a home equity loan. He was able to testify that Trump didn't give a shit about whether Melania knew about this because he always said he could get somebody else.
Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. Who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And who is he? Bruce Rivers, he's the criminal lawyer. And what he do? And it's gonna react to all the self-snitching.
Bruce Rivers, welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, your board-certified criminal defense lawyer, coming to you with my pearl-handled pistol cufflinks and with the content genius behind the camera, behind everything we do. He is the man. He's the man with the plan. He's the man we don't call Stan. He's the man we call Michael Rivers. Today we're reacting to Donald Trump and give you a trial update. And just so you know, my grandma's okay. She's in the basement. And, she's not doing the greatest. She's got, dementia a little bit. But more than that, it's the people that she's hanging out with because she hangs out with people in their 20s. And I don't know how many grandmas that hang out with, people who are just kind of crazy in their 20s. And she goes to raves and stuff. So I'm really worried about her. So we've taken the steps to do power of attorney just to make sure we've got control over stuff. And where did we get that document? We got that from eForms.com. eForms.com is a very effective way to avoid the courtroom and to avoid guys like me. Because here's the thing, I'm very high priced. I cost a lot of money and I'm worth it in the right setting. But for me to do documents for somebody when you can get it on eForms.com, it's not really a thing that you really need to worry about, right? So eForms.com, very effective way to get anything done, like a power of attorney, like if your grandma is hanging out with people in their 20s. Shouldn't happen, right? Because I don't know if they're going to take advantage of her or not. And then you've also got like a bill of sale, like when we had to sell our crotch rocket, or, any kind of business agreement, any kind of legal document, because you are protected by having an agreement in writing. And you can get those agreements or, like a rental agreement or whatever you need. Go to eForms.com. eForms.com, very effective way to avoid the courtroom and avoid high-priced lawyers like me. Okay. Couple things. Now, Stormy Daniels testified last week. And let's talk a little bit about Stormy Daniels. And we'll talk about Michael Cohen here, too, a little bit. One of the things that you have with Donald Trump is an incredibly impossible client. He's bombastic. He is controlling. And, if you don't do what he says, you're going to be out the door. So it puts a lawyer in a very precarious position. Why is that? Well, it's that way because you are in charge of legal strategy. And when you have the client in charge of legal strategy, they're not making their decisions based upon what's good for the case or what's legal or what's not legal. This case should have been defended on something very narrow, very narrow. Did Trump know how these fees were going to be, the monies that were paid to Stormy Daniels, did he know how they were going to be recorded? Because if they can't prove that he knew how they were going to be recorded, there's no conviction there. But instead, what did Todd Blanche say in his opening statement? He said that the sex between Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump never happened. Guess what that forced the state to do? Mr. Bragg, that forced their hand. They had to call her. And guess what? That opens the door to all the sexual allegations. It doesn't fucking matter. One hill of beans whether they fucked or not. It doesn't matter. It matters not. Why is that? Because the payment was made. It's just the threat of exposing that lie or that truth, like that fact or untrue fact, whatever. It's just the threat of exposing that fact is the only thing that's relevant. Because if you put them to the test, guess what? Now we have to talk about it. I mean, and then they objected during Stormy's testimony about the salacious details she was talking about spanking him, about his little wiener, and whatever the fuck, It was such a dumb move, honestly. But I don't think Todd Blanche is not dumb at all. I mean, he's a very smart lawyer. But he was forced by his client to go down that road. So dumb. This case should be just very, very tightly tried. So when Stormy Daniels gets on the stand, she should have, the cross-examination of her is very simple. Well, you have no idea what Trump ordered or didn't order, right? You didn't have any conversations with Mr. Trump after your dalliance with him, correct? And you signed this agreement, but Mr. Trump didn't negotiate this agreement, correct? Somebody else did it on his behalf, right? And so you don't know what he knew or didn't know. In fact, you go down that road, and then you blunt her by just her testimony by keeping it tight and small. Pardon the pun there, because we know it's not either. But you've got Michael Cohen. And let me just back up 1 second. And what they essentially did, they gave Stormy Daniels a platform. They gave Stormy Daniels an opportunity to explain herself, an opportunity to look credible, which I think she kind of did. And they gave her an opportunity to tell a more full story that really didn't fucking matter. It didn't matter at all. Now, let's talk about Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen, Blanche has gone down the road of you're a liar, you're a liar, you're a liar, you're a liar, you're a convicted liar. But who did you lie for? You lied for Trump. And again, I think his testimony should have been kept short. But guess what? This is a fucking rap battle. It's a battle between Donald Trump and Michael Cohen. And Donald Trump isn't going to let him off the stand without making him feel some pain on the stand. However, making the witness feel pain on the stand and what is good for your case are not always in the same ballpark. In other words, you can go after a witness really fucking hard, and if the jury's not with you, it's not going to help your case. In fact, it's going to hurt you. So let's go over some of the things that Michael Cohen has testified. Cohen has jumped around between lies and casting. Cohen is jilted and motivated by to provide dirt on Trump to get out of prison early, and his podcast attacks. It's all an effort to say he can't be trusted and whatever. In a way, that's kind of all they have. In a way, all they have is, first of all, he did testify against Trump, but I don't know that he got out early for cooperation because the Southern District of New York never prosecuted him. He's being prosecuted by the Manhattan DA. He asked him if he was screwed over by the system. He asked him if Anthony Scaramucci visited him in prison. Scaramucci, he was, who Scaramucci was. She was a White House aide for a little time. And, and Cohen has testified that he kind of had hoped he could be considered for a White House job, like chief of staff, and he knew he wasn't that. He knew he wasn't chief of staff material. I mean, how would he be? But all of that kind of doesn't matter because the sheer facts of the matter is that he did take out a home equity loan. He was able to testify that Trump didn't give a shit about whether Melania knew about this because he always said he could get somebody else. It's just that easy. He also said that it was Trump directed everything. So hitting him for being a liar when he was employed by Trump for 10 years plus, and keep in mind he looked up to Trump. He looked up to Trump like a father figure. He was happy to be in that orbit. Michael Cohen really looked up to Trump. He was a Trump loyalist. He did Trump's. He was his fixer. He went to prison for trying to do Trump's bidding, not for this stuff, but for lying to Congress and lying to Mueller about this and that. So he did go to prison, but he went to prison trying to protect Trump. He just did. And you've got a situation where Michael Cohen is sort of a jilted lover in a sense. He's been abandoned by Trump. Trump has called him every name in the book. And you remember when he was on the airplane? We'll play that here for you a second. Michael Cohen is my lawyer. Did you make the payment? He took out $130,000 equity, home equity loan, so it wouldn't come directly out of Trump's coffers. And then they reimbursed him, and not just for the 130. They reimbursed him like 400 and some odd thousand because they put the tax. They covered it up, and they covered it up pretty well. So when you talk about the cross-examination, he says, you told Hope Hicks that you miss him. Who cares? Yes, I did. There was an ongoing investigation going on there, and there was a separation. Yes, there was, but I wasn't told to stay away from or not communicate with his kids, just his family. I don't know where the defense is going to go with this at the end of the day, because he did take out a line of credit. And it wasn't just the one person. It wasn't just Stormy Daniels. Stormy Daniels, Karen McDougal, and the doorman for the fucking building who tried to put out some lie that Trump fathered some child out of wedlock. Now, he's denied that. Trump has. And Trump's denied all these things. And whether they're true or not is immaterial. So when they're defending this stuff on the merits of the statements, that's a lose-lose game for Trump. It should just be, doesn't fucking matter. What matters is whether Trump knew about the payments, which he did, whether he knew how they were recorded, because the whole crux of this case is a false business recording, right? And whether he was responsible for recording the payments as legal fees and then deducting them, because just the false records alone is a misdemeanor. You have to attach that to another crime in order for it to be a felony. The intention to commit using the false business records in furtherance of another crime. The tax problem is a crime. The election problems are a crime. So there's two avenues for this jury to look at. Was he trying to deduct these inappropriately, which he probably was, and was he trying to influence the election? And Michael Cohen did testify that he didn't give a shit whether Melania knew. And I believe that. I've heard Melania talk about this. I know he's no quieter boy. And apparently, when they did the Billy Bush tape, the statement that it's locker room talk came from Melania. So she's part and parcel of this. She's not with Donald because he's handsome. You might want to think that, but give me a break. She says he's with her because she's gorgeous, and she was with him because of his money. I mean, it was pure and simple. It was a symbiotic relationship. They use each other for their own purposes. But when you get into the details of both Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels' testimony, they should be blunted. They should be the cross-examination I'm talking about now should be blunted and very, very short, because you giving them a platform and keeping them on the stand for fucking days, get them off the stand as quickly as possible and say they didn't know shit. Stormy Daniels didn't know how these things were recorded, number one, right? Stormy Daniels didn't know what the intricacies of the payments and the transaction. She just went through her lawyer. So why do you go into whether or not they fucked? There's no reason to do that. Absolutely none. And then you look at Michael Cohen, who is a disgruntled employee at the very least, and he's got his fucking podcast. He's got a shirt on with Donald Trump, behind bars. And, you can go down that rabbit hole all fucking day long. But guess what? Michael Cohen wasn't responsible for recording anything in the books. So he had no clue about that. You hammer on those things. Those are the things that matter. Michael Cohen is only as credible as the documents that corroborate him. So when you look at the big picture, though, between Pecker, between the two accountants that testified, between Stormy Daniels, and Karen McDougal isn't going to testify, and neither is the doorman. But there's so many other people and so many documents that that corroborate the more troublesome witnesses that I think it's a problem for Trump. And going down this rabbit hole of the merits of some of this bullshit, all that does is add fuel to the fire. You know, Trump's team asked for a mistrial when Stormy Daniels was testifying. You know, saying, "Oh, we can't unring this bell," blah blah blah. Well, wait a second. You said in your opening statement that the sex didn't occur. Okay, so we have to get into some detail to combat what you said in your opening statement. There's a doctrine in law called the invited error doctrine. You can't invite error and then claim a mistake. You know, I was trying a case one time, and the other side was asking questions of our expert that were prohibited. But we didn't object because go ahead and ask whatever you want. And it opened the door for our expert to say what we wanted him to say, but we couldn't get it. Well, then they said, we want a mistrial because he said all this. Wait a second. You asked the question. You can't ask a question you don't know the answer to. It's cross-examination 101. And if you do, and you bring out all this shit because of your opening statement and you open the door, you can't invite your own error. So that's going to go nowhere. So this has been our update. They're almost done with this trial. Cohen's not going to be their last witness. And then it'll be time for the defense. But guess what's going to happen with the defense? They're not going to call a single witness. Mark my words. Trump's defense, Trump is not going to testify. No way in fucking hell is he going to testify. Who would fucking want him to do that? You know, I mean, I wouldn't want him to do that. And his exposure is so amazing that he opens himself to perjury like nobody's business. And you don't think this Alvin Bragg is going to go after him for perjury if he lies on the stand? Of course he is. And then that's more punishable. You know, like where's Alan Weisselberg? He lied for Trump, and he's in Rikers Island right now. And so, will he testify? Neither side has subpoenaed him. Neither side wants him to testify. He signed a $2 million deal that he's not to disparage anybody in the Trump orbit or the Trump organization. And as long as he does this, and this, he'll get his severance of $2 million. And one of the things is you can't cooperate with law enforcement. That's illegal. That's an illegal agreement. You can't do that. You can't have a civil agreement that prevents you from cooperating with law enforcement. Highly, highly illegal. Whoever the fuck drafted that should be, reported. So let's say for this, and these illegal contracts are unenforceable. For example, let's say Michael. You want me to say it?
No. Oh, I thought you were saying Michael had sex with an underage
Yeah.
girl.
Or you want me to say it? Let's say.
Somebody.
Let's say Steve Bashakis had sex with an underage girl, and he's this 50-year-old, kind of fat and chubby guy, but he's got a lot of money, and he goes to this underage girl and says, "Look, I don't want you going to the police about this. I had a great time. You didn't have such a great time, but here's $50, and sign this NDA, and you can't go to law enforcement. Unenforceable. You can't do that. That's highly illegal, and that's what they did in this case with Weisselberg, and you just can't do it. But Bragg doesn't know what the fuck he's going to say because he's not cooperating. And the Trump orbit doesn't want him to say anything because he's going to have to tell the truth. Or if he doesn't, he's going to go right back to Rikers Island. So, I mean, but if you look at the fucking chaos of this whole thing, honestly, you look at the chaotic nature of Trump's life. He lives by chaos, one controversy after another. He fights with people constantly. He's always in lawsuits. I don't know how many lawsuits he's got going now. He's got 4 criminal cases, but he's probably got another just ton of lawsuits. I don't know how you could do that. I don't know how your Constitution can take that. Not to mention the fact that, cheating on your wife and just the turmoil that you're causing in your orbit. And then you have to get everybody behind you. I don't know how the fuck you could do it. So keep in mind that we're going to follow this to its logical conclusion. I'm going to guess on average, on balance, that Michael Cohen is going to be deemed more credible than not. We'll see. Well, we'll see. The jury could say, well, I know Trump didn't do this or didn't, but there's no evidence that he actually knew about the recording of these payments and how they were recorded, because he's not an accountant. That could be enough for them to find him not guilty. They really could. I doubt it, because this is such a small, it's not like the Trump organization is this multinational corporation that's got thousands and thousands of employees. The Trump organization is just a small little group of folks. The office where Trump is in Trump Tower in New York City is just a handful of people. It's not like it's thousands of people, filling up this huge tower. Trump controlled a lot. And I think not much went out without Trump knowing about it.
The Trump organization has 22,450 employees.
No, it doesn't.
That's what...
Yeah, that's bullshit.
On Wikipedia, you think that's bullshit?
Yeah, I do. I think I'm just talking about the Trump organization. And when I say the Trump organization, I mean just the closely held people that were in Trump Tower. It's not a lot of people, and I've heard from many people who have been there that it's just a small set of offices, and it's just a few people. So whatever runs through there, Trump knows what the fuck is going on. He's not dumb, and he's directing everything. So we'll see you next time here at Criminal Lawyer Reacts. We'll keep following this, and it's almost done. And we'll give you a verdict watch. And we'll see you next time here at Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers. This is Michael Rivers, our content genius. Everybody loves him. I love him. And again, we went to Portugal with some people and just had an amazing time. George and Lauren, thank you again. Just an amazing experience. Portugal, everybody we met there was absolutely wonderful. And, we were there with our sweethearts, and I just can't tell everybody how much we just absolutely love Portugal. I'm Bruce Rivers, your board-certified criminal defense lawyer. We'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Make sure you subscribe, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, sign up for Patreon. And Patreon, I'm pretty sure everybody's got their hats by now, because they all went out. So sign up for Patreon. We'll send you a hat. See you next time, Criminal Lawyer Reacts.
Could a president order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival?
Could Donald Trump, as president, assassinate a political rival with SEAL Team 6? I just think this is amazing. So Tacopina withdrew from representing him on both cases. Hi, this is Bruce Rivers. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, your personal board-certified criminal defense lawyer. Today we're reacting to, we're giving you an update on Trump and give you an analysis of a bunch of stuff that's going on Trump's legal front. And it's, with the help of our content genius who's behind the camera, Michael Rivers, my son, and your curator of everything we do here on the channel. But before we get to that, this is brought to you by eforms.com. Now we're changing it up a little bit, same company, but eforms.com. Eforms.com is a very effective way to still remotely do business. If you have any kind of document, it's a repository basically for documents. Here's the reason why you use eforms.com. If you hire me to, say, draw up a particular business agreement or something like that, I would charge you a ton of money. Like, even my grandma goes to eforms.com. She did her last will and testament on there, and I didn't find this out till later on. I get the gold in her teeth. But eforms.com is a very effective way to get some things done and not have to pay a high-priced lawyer like myself. You can get a business agreement, power of attorney. You can do just about a bill of sale. So anytime you need a document that's enforceable legally against another party, go to eforms.com. My grandma did. You should too. eforms.com. Good way to avoid lawyers. All right. So today we're reacting to Trump. Now let's just start with the most recent thing that he did last week. He did a couple things, but he sat up and he gave his own fucking closing argument. He who represents himself has a fool for a client. He wanted to give the closing argument. I mean, it's just so stupid because, you're going in front of Engoron, and it's really not for him. It's for public consumption, really. But Engoron said, okay, you can give your closing argument, and these kind of clients just are pains in the asses. But the judge in that case, Engoron, said, you can give your closing argument, but you got to comply with the rules. So, in a closing argument, you have to confine your remarks to the facts of the case and the argument contained within. You can probably make a few little side comments about the motivation of the prosecutor, this and that, but Trump would not agree to those guideposts that the judge set up. And even as lawyers both lawyers on both sides are limited, to those guideposts. They're called rules of evidence. And in your closing argument, you're limited to arguing the facts of your case. You can't just talk about anything you want to fucking talk about. You just can't. And so Trump wouldn't agree to that. So the judge says, then you can't, if you're not going to agree to the rules of evidence, you can't agree, or I can't agree to let you give the closing argument. It'd be dumb for him to do it anyway, because he doesn't know what he's doing. So so then his lawyer makes another pitch and says, can he get up and just say a few words, So he gave him 6 minutes, basically. And then then they broke for lunch, and all Trump did was just do character assassination against the judge, against Letitia James. This is a political witch hunt, blah, blah, blah. And the judge cut him off just before lunch. So 6 minutes. And, and guess what? Reporters are in there. Reporters are writing it down. People hear that he got up and spoke. So it's a win for him in that sense. But it's not going to sway the judge. I mean, nothing he said was going to sway the judge. In fact, one of the things the judge said at some point compared him to Bernie Madoff, a smaller scale, which is really kind of what it is. Okay, so that's on that case. So now that, the closing arguments are in, and, Letitia James is asking for $370 million. Oh, and barring him from doing any real estate in the state of New York. That really is the death penalty. That really is the death penalty for business for Trump. He'd be done in New York, and I don't know. He's no longer on Forbes billionaire list, so I don't know how much money he actually has. It seems like the bulk of his resources are coming from donations, but I don't know that for sure. And so now we fast forward. So what's he got going on this week? Well, he's got that Jean Carroll case. Now, remember last fall, he tried that Jean Carroll case where she accused him of defamation. And they found him in violation of the law, in defamation. And when they did that, she was awarded $5 million. This is what's so stupid, because then he repeats some of the same shit that he said, just like Rudy Giuliani did. Why would you do that? Well, guess what? That gives her another swing at the ball. So now Joe Tacopina, he's a lawyer in New York, and he represented Trump in that Jean Carroll case. Well, he was all slated to do everything. He was supposed to be on the criminal side of that the Manhattan DA document case, the business fraud case, and he also was supposed to represent him in the Jean Carroll case, because now they're just going up for damages. I'll tell you about that in a second. Trump made more statements, and he was already found in violation, so it's just a matter of what these additional statements, how much more than the $5 million is he going to get? So Tacopina withdrew from representing him on both cases. It's unclear as to, why he withdrew, but you want me to speculate? I'll speculate, because that's what we do here, in the open forum. We call it Criminal Lawyer Reacts. We react to news. One of a couple things. One, he lost that case, so I'm sure he's sideways with Trump. I'm sure he's sideways with Trump. Number two, I bet he's not getting paid, because when you lose with Trump, you don't get paid. And Trump doesn't give a shit who he pays and who he doesn't pay. He just wants you to show up. And, he never paid Rudy. Rudy was asking for 20 grand a day. Fuck. Did he get paid? No, he didn't. And he's got a history of not paying lawyers. He spent over $40 million of these donations that he's getting. Stop the steal. Anyway, so Tacopina is probably really happy that he got out. And the reason, one of the things that about a guy like Trump is going to be just an absolutely impossible client to work for. I would never want to be Trump's lawyer for a lot of reasons. I mean, the issues are all interesting. And he's got some defenses to some of this stuff, but he's impossible. He's absolutely impossible because he won't take your advice. He won't agree with your strategy, and he'll challenge you on everything going down the pike. And he'll want you to do things that are not only probably unethical, but are just impractical and against his best interest. Looking at that, you'd think that would be enough. But no. Where was he last week? Now, Trump attended the Court of Appeals argument. What was the Court of Appeals argument about? Well, in the D.C. case, the January 6th case, they filed a motion to dismiss the case, saying that he's got immunity from prosecution. Let's listen to what the Court of Appeals had to say.
Could a president order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? That's an official act in order to SEAL Team 6?
He would have to be and would speedily be, impeached and convicted before the criminal prosecution.
Okay, so did you hear that? That was a Court of Appeals judge asking, and one of the things, now when you file an appeal, you file a brief, and it's based upon the record that you created down below in the district court, and then when you get there, they'll have questions for you, and based upon their questions, you can kind of see what they're thinking, and if the judges don't have any questions, you're sort of fucked. But if they have questions like that one, could Donald Trump, as president, assassinate a political rival with SEAL Team 6? I just think this is amazing. You think your behind's going to look good like this? You damn right it will. With Step 1, they're amazing. They're amazing high-performance underwear. Am I wearing them now? You damn right I am. I wear high-performance Step 1s when I'm in the courtroom, when I'm on the ski slopes, if I'm running. And here's the thing. They are made out of a viscose material derived from organic bamboo. So guess what that means? You don't sweat. They have a Lycra panel in between your thighs so you don't chafe. So there's no chafing, no sweating. You got this pouch that nestles your goods the way it's supposed to. Let me just tell you something. You guys alone, if you guys order some of these at checkout, 25% discount when you enter in Bruce Rivers in the code, in the promo code. You have a 30-day guarantee, so if you don't like it within 30 days, you can send it back and get a full refund, but that isn't going to happen. To go online and go on the link down below to 25% off, and you'll love them. Step 1, get some.
There would be no criminal prosecution, no criminal liability for that?
Chief Justice's opinion in Marbury against Madison and our constitutional tradition and the plain language of the impeachment judgment clause all clearly presuppose that what the founders were concerned about was not.
I asked you a yes or no question. Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached, would he be subject to criminal prosecution?
If he were impeached and convicted first. And
so your answer is
no. My answer is qualified yes. There's a political process that would have to occur under the structure of our Constitution, which requires.
There's no law that says that. There is absolutely no law that says a sitting president is immune from prosecution unless he's impeached first. I mean, how ridiculous does that sound? Whenever a justice in the Court of Appeals interrupts you and says no, you can tell you're not winning the argument.
require impeachment and conviction by the Senate. In these exceptional cases, as the OLC memo itself points out from the Department of Justice, you'd expect a speedy impeachment and conviction. But what the founders were much more worried about than using criminal prosecution to discipline presidents was what James Madison calls in Federalist number 47, the newfangled and artificial treasons. They were much more concerned about the abuse of the criminal process for political purposes to disable the presidency from
So think about that statement and think about the question that the judge asked. They were more worried about using the criminal process in a political context, but you could use a criminal act to further your own political end, and you wouldn't get prosecuted if you weren't impeached. Does that make any fucking sense whatsoever? Why did Nixon have to be pardoned then? Why was it necessary to pardon Nixon for? So here's what's going to happen. This is my prediction. You're going to have a situation where they're going to give you an opinion on this case fairly quickly. Then Trump's people are, and normally you don't get an interlocutory appeal as a defendant, but Trump's people are going to appeal to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is going to not hear the case. That would be my guess. They're not going to come down and rescue him, not like Elena Habba. And Elena Habba is in a little bit of hot water because she made some pretty reckless statements, that, well, we put him on the bench, meaning Kavanaugh, and he's going to come through for us. Give me a fucking break. How would you say that? You can't say that stuff as a lawyer. We have ethical rules that we need to adhere to. But so if this pans out like I think it's going to, and the U.S. Supreme Court does not hear that argument about immunity, then the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals decision becomes the law of the case, and then they're back on for trial, which I believe is March 4th, and so there might be a little bit of a delay, but there's still plenty of time to get that going.
From factions and political opponents. And of course, that's exactly what we see in this case.
I've asked you a series of hypotheticals about criminal actions that could be taken by a president and could be considered official acts. And I've asked you, would such a president be subject to criminal prosecution if he's not impeached or convicted?
Requirement.
And your answer, your yes or no answer is no.
I believe I said qualified yes if he's impeached and convicted first. We may be saying the same thing.
See, that is just dancing around what the judge said, and you just don't want to do that.
Okay, so he's not impeached or convicted. Let's put that aside. You're saying a president could sell pardons, could sell military secrets, could order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival.
Sale of military secrets strikes me as something that might not be held to be an official act. The sale of pardons is something that's come up historically and was not prosecuted.
But your brief says that communicating with an executive branch agency is an official act, and communicating with a foreign government is an official act. That's what presidents do.
They're very strange situation. This is very strange.
So you can tell by the tenor of the questions that they're just not buying it. And so you know damn well that that circuit is not going to rule that he's immune, and it was such a bad precedent because then a president could do whatever the hell he wants. You could suspend the Constitution. You could be president for life, and that just isn't going to happen. All right, so let's talk about what happened in Georgia last week. So now 4 people have pled guilty, and part of that didn't happen last week, but it happened last fall, in October, I believe. In the election interference case, 4 people have pled guilty, and as part of their plea agreements, they have agreed to testify on behalf of the government. Trump is facing 13 charges in Georgia. Now, what's going on there is there's some allegation that they're raising about Letitia James and one of the lawyers, and billing and going on trips and a romantic, thing going on. That, in all honesty, that's just smoke and mirrors. Why is that smoke and mirrors? Well, it is smoke and mirrors because it has nothing to do with the facts of the case. I mean, the guy supposedly, and I saw this on one of the interviews, supposedly the guy that she's with has billed, 24 hours in a day and has billed over $600,000. I don't know if he must be an outside lawyer, because otherwise why would you be billing the county for the time that you're there? But Nobody works 24 hours in a day. And that's so easy to prove. So really, that's going to be more of a political embarrassment for Fannie Willis. And so that, who knows what's going to happen there. And really, when you think about it, how stupid of her to do this. I mean, what an unforced error. Because you've got the highest profile case that you'll ever have, right? And to put yourself in a position where all of a sudden your integrity is questioned, the integrity of your staff is, who's working for you is questioned, and it's mired down by a romantic affair or, relationship or whatever. Now, people all the time, work together, fuck together, whatever. That's common. But when you're the boss and you're in charge of paying people and you endorse somebody working 24 hours in a fucking day, it's just bad form. And the issue isn't that she's hired people to do this or that. The issue is that she's having a relationship with one of them and they're using government funds to go on trips, this and that. I don't know how much this is true or not true, but we'll find out more once we have that hearing in front of the judge. And I don't mean to minimize it, because if it is public malfeasance, it is what it is. But it's not going to derail the trial. The allegation by the Trump team is that he's not qualified. He's billed over $650,000 and a whole bunch of other stuff. But what difference does it make if he's qualified or not qualified? If he's not qualified, fuck, I don't want that guy on the other side because I'd kick his ass. But it's just smoke and mirrors, because it really has nothing to do with the underlying facts of the case. And that's what they do constantly. And anything they can do to delay. And lastly, let's get into the Florida document case. In the Florida document case, they filed a motion to compel. There's some haggling or wrangling about the Trump team wants to get access to certain documents. And so they're really kind of commiserating over discovery. And Judge Cannon in that case has denied Jack Smith's motion to compel, and really they're compelling defense on their advice of counsel defense. They want them to disclose, and she says it's just too early. So, which is fine. As things get going, we'll see what happens with that. I mean, that case is, he's going to try to rely on advice of counsel. That's going to be a double-edged sword, because one of the things you have to do when you rely on advice of counsel defense is you have to waive the privilege. You have to waive attorney-client privilege. And so, guess what? He had more than one fucking lawyer. You waive the privilege with one, you're going to waive it with all. Pat Cipollone, I mean, you've seen his statements. He said, you're going to do that? Well, you better get a good fucking criminal defense lawyer. That's what he told one of the staff members. So you're gonna see that if they rely on advice of counsel, there's other lawyers that are gonna say, no, we told him this. You cannot, in good faith, just go by what people are saying. You have to reasonably believe it. You can't just go shop for the answer that you're looking for. And then, I've got somebody that will say what I want him to say. And that appears what Trump has done in this case. So this has just been our update on Trump. He's got so much shit going on. Honestly, he's got money going out the door. And more lawyers are going to drop out. You watch. There are going to be all kinds of lawyers who are going to come and go. And, because he's just an awful person to even think about working with. When somebody's going through lawyers like water, that means that the client is extremely difficult. The people are probably not getting paid. And the client only wants to hear what he wants to hear. And that is Trump. He wants to hear what he wants to hear. He doesn't want bad news. I want to do what I want to do. And finally, people say, well, fuck this. I can't do this anymore. I can't do what you are asking me to do. It's unethical. It's illegal. And I just can't do it. Or I can't put up with you anymore because you're a fucking asshole and you're not paying me and I got other things I can do. Difficult clients are so taxing, especially when you got all this shit, 91 counts that he's indicted with. He's got civil cases up the ass. He's being sued by Capitol Police who were there on January 6th. He's being sued by Gene Carroll. He's being sued on this Ponzi scheme or this multi-level marketing thing for these telephones. Nobody's even talking about that because it's kind of a who gives a shit in a sense because, it was just a scam that Don Jr. and the Trump organization created. They've been banned from philanthropy in New York because they were using their own foundation as their own piggy bank. They've got 4 criminal cases. One in New York, one in D.C., one in Florida, and one in Georgia. If I had a client that was looking at all that, I'd probably do something to try to do a global resolution. But he's not going to take any kind of deal. And when Trump talks, you heard him talk on the steps. I take this as a badge of honor because if they're doing it to me, they could do it to you, and I'm fighting the fight, blah, blah, fucking blah. He has put himself in each one of these positions. Just on the Gene Carroll case alone, all he had to do was shut the fuck up. That's all he had to do. Now he has given her the ability to fuck with him again. And the only issue there is damages. It would be nice to have a client like this if they paid you on a regular basis because, clients that are in trouble and have a lot of money, great. But he's a pain in the ass and he doesn't pay his people. And you're going to see people jumping this way or jumping that way. So we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Make sure you subscribe, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, sign up for Patreon. We'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers, along with our content genius, Michael Rivers. We'll see you next time.
1 hour later, he is playing us and the president. What should I say to this a-hole? He is playing with the most powerful man on the planet.
When you read your own words back to you and they're exactly opposite of what you just testified to, your credibility just goes out the window. So when you have a lawyer like Costello getting sideways with the judge, not a good thing. And the judge threatened, if you do this again, I'm going to throw out your entire testimony and I'm going to have you removed from the courtroom. That's terrible. I mean, and he's a lawyer. But he says, he says, are you staring me down? And he goes, I want you to know that your actions are contemptuous. You do not stare me down. Hi, welcome to another fun-filled episode of Criminal Lawyer Reacts. I'm Bruce Rivers with our content genius, Michael Rivers, behind the camera. Today we're reacting to Donald Trump and the end of the trial, the hush money trial. And before we get to that, before we get to the final witness and kind of an analysis of what this trial is going to mean and just where they go from here, this is brought to you by eForms.com. eForms.com. Let's say you have an unwanted grandma living in your basement and you need to get her out. Well, you can get an eviction form. She's a tenant of will. She doesn't pay anything. Or you get a bill of sale for selling her crotch rocket. Or you get a power of attorney because she can't handle her affairs. Or you get a medical power of attorney because she needs some medical directive and how to care for her later on. Or a rental agreement, or any kind of agreement that you need, any kind of thing that you need to keep out of court, you go to eForms.com. eForms.com, a highly effective way to avoid expensive people like me and keep you out of court. Because having a written agreement, having a written power of attorney, gives you the power and the security to know that you are protected, whether it's a transaction, whether it's the power of attorney, or whether it's a rental agreement. Whatever you need, go to eForms.com. Okay, today they wrapped up the hush money trial in New York City for Donald J. Trump. Now, and did Trump testify? Did he testify? No, he did not. Donald Trump did not testify, and that is not surprising. Why? Because they would have eaten his lunch. They would have been there for another week, honestly. There's so much there. He made so many statements. There's so many things he talked about, so many ways that they could trip him up. It was the smartest decision to not have him testify. And people say all this kind of stuff. Oh, he's guilty if he doesn't testify. No, that's not true. He's not guilty if he doesn't testify. The thing about him not testifying, though, is that the jury can't infer anything negative about it. You cannot consider his silence. You have the absolute Fifth Amendment right to remain silent during a trial. You can testify if you want to. But if you choose not to, nobody could hold that decision against you. They can't say, oh, you must be guilty because you're not saying you're innocent. If a prosecutor did that, that would be a reversible error, and they couldn't come back and prosecute him later. It would be a mistrial. And mistrials based on prosecutorial misconduct result in a dismissal with prejudice. That means they can't bring it up again. So I'm not surprised at all that Trump didn't testify. I think that was a smart decision. I am surprised, however, that the defense called Costello to the stand. Costello, as you remember, he was advising Michael Cohen and not really sure that this was a smart decision on the part of the defense. Because, for starters, he got sideways with the judge, and that just didn't make sense. There was an objection by the state, by the plaintiff in this case, and Mr. Costello is rolling his eyes, and he says, geez, and he's making all these comments, and he's a lawyer. He's a lawyer, and he gets really sideways with the judge. And then he says, strike that. Strike that. He's not the fucking judge. And so they took a break. The jury was out of the room. And he says, you don't say geez when there's an objection. And you don't say strike that because I'm the only one that... here's the thing. Judges are very parochial about their courtroom and the procedure and, decorum. And so then shortly after that, he was about to bring the jury back in. He goes, hold on a second. Clear the courtroom. That usually doesn't happen. In fact, I can tell you that's never happened in my career. And I've tried a lot of cases. But he says, he says, are you staring me down? And he goes, I wanted you to know that your actions are contemptuous. You do not stare me down. Now, it might seem, petty, but I can tell you the communication you make with your body language is huge. I know of a prosecutor that got sanctioned because she kept rolling her eyes, and like, you can't do that. You can't do that. I've been guilty of it myself. I remember I was trying a case, and we got to the end of the state's case, and I thought they really didn't prove the assault that happened. I thought there's just no way. And I moved for judgment of acquittal. And I felt so strongly about it, I thought that there's no way the judge isn't going to grant my motion. And the judge denied my motion. And I'm like, fuck. I don't think I said fuck, but I know I'm like, you can't show your disdain. You gotta be a poker face. And he says, Mr. Rivers, blah, 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 And remember the Parkland shooter? That's a little more brazen, where the lawyer is flipping either the court or somebody off. I don't know who they were flipping off, but they got in trouble for that. So when you have a lawyer like Costello getting sideways with the judge, not a good thing.
It's a lot of intensity, to say the least, Jose, as Anna mentioned, right? We're now in redirect from the defense here on their own witness. I got to say, just kind of reading the tea leaves here and what we're hearing from inside the courtroom, this testimony so far from Robert Costello is fairly damning for the defense. They wanted to bring Robert Costello on the stand to refute essentially Michael Cohen's testimony. To say, as we heard from him yesterday, that Michael Cohen never said that Donald Trump had a relationship with Stormy Daniels. They never had sex. He never said this was for a reimbursement of Donald Trump, that Donald Trump never knew about the payment made to Stormy Daniels.
So one of the things, when you have a witness, and I don't know why the defense did this, but when you have a witness, you got to know all the questions the answer to all the questions you're going to ask, right? And my guess is that this was something that Trump demanded that they call Costello, because they had to know these emails that are coming up. You'll see this in a second, that these emails were out there. And so remember, Costello was trying to be Cohen's lawyer. Costello was trying to rein him in and trying to tell him, you've got friends in high places. You've got, to try to keep him in the fold. In other words, I don't want you flipping on Trump.
But instead what they are doing, especially during cross-examination by Susan Hoffinger, is kind of ticking away at Robert Costello's credibility, right? We have talked a lot about how the defense was going to chip away at the credibility of Michael Cohen and witnesses like Stormy Daniels as well. Well, in fact, the prosecution is doing that exact same thing as they did during cross-examination to Robert Costello. And I want to read you through some of what we heard from Robert Costello's testimony so far this morning, because it is fascinating.
So what she's going to do is she's going to read his own words in emails. And nothing is more damning than you saying one thing, and it's, but didn't you say this? And you can't really fucking argue with that.
So Hoffinger asks this: your first meeting with Cohen at the Regency, you discussed how connected you were to Rudy Giuliani. Costello, not true. You're quoting from an email that was much later. Hoffinger, you were very close to Rudy Giuliani, and you've known him for 50 years. Yes, known him for years, and we went to a wedding. Hoffinger, you sent this email 2 days later. I'm going to read it from the jury, for the jury. I am sure you saw the news that Rudy is joining the Trump legal team. I told you that my relationship with Rudy could be very, very useful to you. So refuting what Robert Costello said on the stand a moment ago. Again, they do it again. Hoffinger, you continue to tell him that you could provide a back channel to Giuliani. No, that's not correct. Hoffinger, do you remember sending this email to Cohen? Costello, yes, I do. Here's the email, guys. Michael, I just spoke to Rudy Giuliani and told him I was on your team. Rudy was thrilled and said this could not be a better situation for the president or you. Again, refuting Costello's testimony. And this.
So one of the things, they have an instruction called falso in uno, falso in omnibus. And what that means is if you're lying about one thing, you're lying about everything. And one of the things that, you kind of liken it to, if somebody's lying to this jury, you can destroy a marriage with one lie. You can destroy a relationship with one lie. You can destroy a friendship with one lie. I didn't have sex with your wife. You can really destroy a lot with just one lie. And so you can tell the jury, look, you can throw out somebody's entire testimony if you don't believe what they said.
One, guys, which is incredibly damning, I would say, kind of finishing up cross-examination from Susan Hoffinger. And it starts with this. In June of 2018, this is Hoffinger. You were upset that he was playing you. Costello, no, that's the wrong word. I was informed. Hoffinger, didn't you believe he was also playing President Trump? Costello, I don't think that's correct.
Really? Oh, we'll read on.
Hoffinger, yesterday you were asked a question by defense counsel whose interests did you have in mind? Hoffinger, you said your obligation was to Michael Cohen. Do you remember saying that? Costello, yes. Here's the email, guys. Hoffinger writes, Jeff, this is the response I received from Michael after sending him a detailed text, followed by a voicemail 1 hour later. He is playing us and the president. What should I say to this a-hole? He is playing with the most powerful man on the planet.
When you read your own words back to you and they're exactly opposite of what you just testified to, your credibility just goes out the window.
That email certainly speaks for itself, does it not, Mr. Costello? That is Hoffinger saying it to Robert Costello. Damning testimony, guys, to say the least.
So that's just part of it. And the judge threatened, if you do this again, I'm going to throw out your entire testimony and I'm going to have you removed from the courtroom. That's terrible. And he's a lawyer. He's a lawyer because as a lawyer, you can get sanctioned for that kind of stuff. So what we have here is if the case doesn't rise and fall on Michael Cohen, if it did, they'd probably have a problem. But we started with David Pecker. We end with Costello. Now, but we have other evidence. We have the checks that are handwritten. We have a recording between Michael Cohen and Donald Trump. And then, there's other emails from Cohen saying you don't represent me. I'm not your client. And Costello is really trying hard to get him into the fold, to control him so he doesn't turn on Donald Trump. And you see that email you just played us. It really kind of cuts against everything Costello testified to. So what else are they going to do? The closing arguments are going to be a week from today, next Tuesday. And so what are they going to do? Well, they're going to fight about the jury instructions because what the other crime is really important. Because and that's where I think the weakness in the government's case is. If they didn't define and fully explain to the jury what crime they are covering up, all you have are a bunch of misdemeanors, which are probably not prison. So they're going to really have to tie all this in their closing argument. So what they're doing now is they're gonna wrangle about the they're gonna haggle about the jury instructions, and there's all kinds of different jury instructions. What is reasonable doubt? What is circumstantial evidence? What is direct evidence? But then you get to the meat of the statute that he's charged with, and also what is the other crime that he's accused of, and that is the weakness in the government's case now. So once they get that done, they'll come back to court on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, the government starts with their closing argument. Then the defense goes. And then the government gets one more shot at a rebuttal because it's their case. And you get that in every case. The plaintiff always gets a rebuttal. But what's the rebuttal? Rebuttal is when you have the chance to address something the other party said, and your remarks have to be confined to what the other argument was. So when Brad gets up, or his team, whoever's going to do the closing argument, they can't get up and re-give their whole closing argument. Their remarks have to be confined to the defense's closing argument, things that are in there. So you can say, like, now that you just heard from the defense and they said this, but really this is not that, simplifying it obviously, but that's what you have to do. And then after that happens, the judge reads the jury instructions to them, and then they get the case. And I don't know that they're sequestered. I've always not been in favor of sequestering a jury. They may be. I'm not 100% on that. I just think you're treating a juror like a jailbird. However, in this case, I would support sequestration. That's where they go to a hotel at the end of deliberations. They can't talk to anybody. They probably don't have TV. And if they do, it's just limited channels, I would think. But they keep them away from media, keep away from other outside influences. And then when they get their verdict, they give a note to the judge, and then they come back. Sometimes they'll have questions. Could you read back testimony, which they never read back testimony. But, and if they have a question, they all come back to the courtroom and they give it to the judge, and then they read the question in open court. So it is fascinating from a criminal law standpoint what's happened during this trial. I mean, it's 20 days of testimony, about 50 hours worth of testimony, and Trump put on one witness who was ineffective and didn't testify himself, which I think was smart. So we'll see you next time here on Criminal Lawyer Reacts. Make sure you subscribe, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, sign up for Patreon, and we'll see you next time here on Criminal